Welcome to the planning board meeting for June 20th, 2017. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Joe, would you like to be a voting member this evening? We need one?
Sure.
Good. Roll call. Tom Young, Chair.
Matt Shoemaker, Vice Chair.
Kimberly Queenan, member.
Michael Croto, clerk.
Joe Blanchette, alternate.
Dave Samuel, member.
Seeing no one is here, there's no public input this evening. Community design, Jen.
Who's absent? Steve and
Steve
Oh.
and Tyler.
Tyler. Thank you.
Community design. All right. Getting like messages here. Apparently I edited the page at some point and it thought I closed out in edit mode. Okay, so the homework was to send along or bring with you tonight your statement or definition of what a community design chapter is. I think the thought here after the last meeting was trying to figure out where we do or don't have consensus on what the content is. We went through the exercise. David kind of brainstormed out a list of content topics. We did the little survey monkey vote and still didn't necessarily have a tremendous amount of consensus. So this was trying to kind of better put some words to what we thought the chapter is and should be. And then what questions we have remaining. So what was sent along as of this afternoon, it's compiled, it's there on the Google site. I made sure that it was anonymous, and lumped it all together. So I guess the conversation for tonight is to take a look at what we have, what else we should add to it, and go from there. Reactions, responses. Can we draft up something where we do have some consensus as a board?
So I'm clicking on the link. What is
The
your
link at
community
the
design?
top never works. Scroll to the bottom. I don't know why that doesn't work.
Well,
Cheat.
since you didn't get mine,
Yes.
and since I can't read it, I can tell you what the gist of mine was, just so that
Okay.
it can be incorporated at least in the discussion. So I had written something to the effect of, in my opinion, it is community design means sort of overall what should the feel of the town be, and with respect to that, what attributes are going to create that feel.
Okay. Okay. And I think that's somewhat consistent but more concise with the other two that were submitted that I have. What is your definition of a community design chapter? But we also had some concerns raised in terms of what the appropriate extent should be of such a chapter, and to what degree are we dictating what applications should look like before they come to us. And so if you guys want to take a second to kind of read through everything, does that sound? Okay.
Do you have a hard copy?
I do have a couple hard copies.
Good.
Yes.
Are we going to just talk, for starters, about the concerns?
We can. Do you guys want to take a second to read through everything first, or?
I don't know. I'd almost rather just I'd almost rather just read that section and then focus on that, and then
Okay.
as opposed to read the whole document and then forget what I read.
Okay.
That's just may just be me.
Maybe there's a few other people's here and go quickly. Give them a second.
I've got to ask, infuriates one board member?
Let me
Really?
guess.
Do you want anonymity on this?
It's you all's call whether you want to remain.
I don't see any reason to remain anonymous on this. We're trying.
I just figured I was putting it all together. I was going to make it just.
It's not like you can't tell who says what, anyways. For the most part.
All right, you guys want to go through the comments? Or the concerns one by one, or?
I personally agree that it doesn't necessarily need to be super detailed.
Okay.
But I do think that without, and perhaps this anonymous person is correct that maybe it's something that should be delegated to a committee that's, because this is a big task. But I think it's important to recognize that without any sort of direction, or guidance on this, you very easily could become something that you don't want to be. And so I think that we do have some obligation, whether it is to delegate this or whether it is to address it. I think we do have some duty to try to best represent what the town wants. Because I think the one thing, if you read the 2012 survey, that is clear that people don't want is they don't want Route 102 in Hudson to spill into Litchfield. And you very, very easily could have something like that happen without getting ahead of something like this.
Okay.
I think, when we look at Litchfield, I think, things that I see that have importance. Number one is the agricultural feel of the town on Route 3A. The environment. Litchfield is unique in the fact that I think that Litchfield actually has a lot of woods, a lot of places where people like to bike, hike, walk, and we have conservation areas, and our natural resources, I think, are important. And I think the other thing is the accessibility of the town to other areas, and the bedroom community feel that people coming into town have in terms of the development and what's going on. Yes, we have some economic, we have some businesses in town. The small business feel of it, I think, is also important too. But I think, we're definitely diverse in that respect. So I think that's where we want to probably gear our idea of conceptual design. I think basically from the agricultural standpoint, from the environmental standpoint, and I also believe from the community standpoint as to the developments that we have here in the town. That's just my 2 cents. So.
My thought on it, and I may be going against everybody else, but I see a standing committee of the planning board, the zoning, the agricultural, the conservation, and 2 or 3 members of the public to go over to do the first steps on this. We have the old census, it doesn't tell us that much.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that Jen asked for was what are some questions, and I think that we would definitely need to find a way to obtain more information, which I think we just kind of talked about last week as well.
And one good source we have is the new Facebook page, that they should be involved as well. They have a very large backing.
Oh yeah, the What's Up Litchfield.
Yep.
And I also think you probably want to, along with zoning, planning, and conservation, at least have someone from the Board of Selectmen,
Yeah,
probably,
well,
too.
actually, should have something from every board in town, even the rec commission.
That's a good point, too. The Rec Commission, yeah,
Yeah.
has a,
It should be everywhere, zoning, rec commission, everybody.
My concern would be if we do the first, attempt at this, our subjectivity and bias would be in it. And we're not supposed to be in this process. We're supposed to be monitoring the rules and is it legal of what they're in front of us to be doing. I just don't want to make us part of the process. We're not really supposed to be in it.
Yeah. Kind of in response to that, the planning board has clear authority to set policy and to create statements as to that reflect the community's vision. That's the point of the master plan, is to lay out what you as the planning board, acting on behalf of the citizens of the community, think is important for the future and how to shape the community into the future. To help ensure that separation and objectivity, that's why you have your zoning ordinance, where the majority of your land use regulation is embedded in the zoning ordinance, of which you do not administer. That goes to the zoning board, and that creates that separation. You do look at subdivision and site plan regulations, but they first have to pass that test of do they meet the zoning ordinance before you can, as a board, act on it. You also have an obligation to create transparency. And so by laying out and being clear and articulating what the residents see as the future for the community, and putting that out there so that applicants have that information, you're helping them to navigate that system in a way that is consistent with the community's vision. That said, you're right, you do have an obligation to be objective when you're hearing an application. But you also are, the power to protect the community is entrusted in you as the planning board. And so you have an obligation to collect, understand, and require that vision be carried through to the extent that it's incorporated into, at least in the planning board's case, the subdivision and site plan regulations. So that's something that's entrusted to you as the planning board.
So Tom's point of getting all the groups together collectively
is huge. That is really important.
Because we can't do this ourselves. We were a piece of it, but not the whole thing.
I would definitely not disagree.
But what would their
Just my
charge
point.
be? What would the charge be to that committee?
That's I
What
think
do you
what
mean
we
what
have
would the
to.
charge? You mean the mission of the
Figure out.
committee?
Well, what we have to create I think we have to create the framework
Yeah.
to say this is what we want everyone to get involved
Yeah,
in.
we need, because everything's saying, the voices of the residents,
Yeah.
really?
Yes.
And we don't have the tools to do that yet, but they might have other input, or we try to put in place tools to do
And
that.
I think that there are pieces, we kind of touched on it last week, but I think Michael just expanded on it a little bit too, where it's like, I think last week I said, from my perspective, there's two major things. Open space is like a major concern, and then if we are going to have any sort of commercial development, what would that look like in terms of, you know, how much could we have, what would it be composed of, and you know, where would it be? But we then go a step further with all those other boards too. There's other considerations like the conservation land, and you know, is one of the focuses that the town would like to see is more accessibility. You know, could we do a better job with maintaining our trails and stuff to improve people's ability to use those things? Like, I think there's pockets of things that we can use to focus on community design, and it's I think hashing out a little bit more what those like foundation pieces of our town are. And you did a good job of that just now, but I think we could even get a little bit further into that and say, you know, like we talked about it last week. I love talking about commercial development, so we know that commercial development here is going to be very minimal. It's not going to be a lot of it. It's going to be very, you know, confined. But from my perspective, it might be something as simple as if you go into downtown or the little downtown area in Hollis, it's just a small little section. There's not. I was driving through Hollis today. It's mostly you drive through Hollis, you think agricultural community. Even where there's commercial development, it's very limited and it's done very tastefully.
But again, that's our subjectivity. It might not be what the town wants collectively. That's
Right,
why
but
we need
we're-
to gather the information.
Right, we have to gather
From
the
all the
information.
parties.
That's my read on the 2012, what I've pulled from the 2012.
And I think we could play off of that. I mean, I think the conceptual design, in terms of, you know, what the zoning ordinances provide, I think playing on that, I think, is going to be huge, because you're going to need zoning in order to get an idea of what you're going to be looking at. So I think having that input is critical.
So I don't disagree with anything that's been said here. I'm going to ask, because we're throwing out a lot of opinions here, which is important and ultimately will become important. But if we start here today with the end in mind, the end being an approved community design chapter to become part of the master plan. If that is the end, how do we get from where we are today to where we want to be? What I'm hearing people say is, well, I have an opinion. Good. What I'm hearing people say is, we want to get other opinions. Good. I have two questions. One, how do we get those opinions together? And how do we not, emphasis on the word not, abdicate the responsibility which Jen just laid out to us, which is we have a responsibility to provide our opinion to anything that comes to us. And if we get everybody in Litchfield to offer an opinion, our approach to what that opinion is could be, okay, great, we're going to take everything that you've given us and we're going to put it into a community design plan. Could be, present to us a community design plan. So you see where I'm going is there can be different approaches to the preliminary work of getting to an approved community design plan. The thing that I don't want to do is I don't want to say we're at the beginning that we're going to abdicate the responsibility of offering our opinions, because it could come back, you know, it won't, but it could come back. Everybody wants big box retail in Litchfield. It won't come back that way, but it could come back that way. So that's the farthest example, and I don't think that's truly what people want. But it could come back that everyone who participated in this as a citizen, that's what they stated. Only one person showed up, and that's what we got. Doesn't mean that we abdicate our responsibility for offering our opinion that we don't think that that's what the town wants. So my question is, I'm getting to it, I apologize, is how do we get from where we are today to that approved community design plan? What we're talking about right now is what we want to see in the community design plan. Let's talk about the route to get there. That's what I'd like to.
That's why I think it's important to look at the 2012 survey, base some sort of logical opinion, and then look at what, I know you're going to disagree with this, but we talked about, you know, what's feasible in a town like this. And you said, well, let's not set forth what's feasible because what if we're missing something? And I agree with that. And I think you need to leave, if we're going to gather information, we need to leave some open-endedness for people to offer ideas like that. However, one of the things, I do think giving some direction is important because I don't think it's worth wasting our time on people replying, yeah, I want big box stores in Litchfield, because it's not feasible. Like, it's not even, there's no realm in which that's possible, right? Like, they would not, just not, there's no, you couldn't fit them, there's not enough people here to support them, it's just, it wouldn't happen. So I think if you don't give any sort of direction, and that's part of the problem with the 2012 survey, is it's very broad,
Exactly.
and you can't do much with it. So we need something that's a lot more defined and guides somewhat.
So what are the steps that you're recommending then?
The steps that I'm recommending are we take those pieces like we just started talking about. We take these pieces where we say, hey, listen, community design, one of the things we need to talk about is open space in Litchfield. What does that mean? Right now, people really value those fields that they drive by that are farms. They're fields, they're farms. If they stop farming those, they have the right to sell their land for whatever they want.
Big box retail.
Big box retail, houses was a very, in today's, if it was today and one of them offered up their farms, you'd have a subdivision before you next week. That's just what's happening right now. So if we're looking at open space, what do people value for open space? We get that you like those fields that are farms, but unless you plan on opening your own farm, what else could that be in the future to preserve open space? Is it athletic fields? Is it parks? Is it, whatever it is? That's just one example.
So I'm hearing you, but the only step that I heard you say was, let's talk about it. We're talking about it, but that's
right. But
that's not the next active step.
The next active step.
I'm looking for a plan. I'm looking
Right,
for
I
a plan
understand
to
that,
get
but-
to that community design chapter.
Okay. So what do you suggest?
I don't know. and here's the thing. I heard in this group, well, let's pull together members from other boards. Great. Step one, solicit membership to a subcommittee in order to work within the context that we provide, i.e. your mission is to fill in the blank. Solicit participation of those people. Provide them with a context to work within. Provide them with a deliverable. Define what date the deliverable is due. Set up the context by which we intend to review that deliverable and either approve, modify, or send it back to the team for...
So, to answer your question, I think the first step is we want to give them context to deliberate in, right? So we want to say to them, that's my point of what I just brought up, is we want to say to them, these are the points that we think need to be discussed for community design. So we want your opinion on open space. We want your opinion on, and you can break that down further. We want your opinion on commercial development. We want your opinion on, what were the other things that you said?
Residential development.
Right. Well, residential development, it's kind of
You still wanna get that involved. It's
right.
fine.
Right.
Right, but it does have to go deeper, because if they don't understand, okay, great, you set the context, we want your opinion on this. If they don't understand that it's because we're designing a community design to become part of the master plan, and are we looking for their opinions, or are we looking for them to present something that says, this is what we believe about architectural heritage and agriculture and agritourism and those things as part of what it is you, the planning board, need to approve.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be twofold. It's going to be, one is, I do think we need to have some mechanism in order to gauge what the general consensus of the public is on certain matters. With respect to the boards, I think we want to have directed, request directed input on each of these categories that we're going to lay out. So if it's the rec commission and we're saying open space, well, they have obviously an interest in open space, right? It's a no-brainer. So we're going to be looking for specific, stuff that relates to that's necessary for their board in the context of community design. But I think the very first step is to say these are the subcategories that create the community design or that we think are the substantial parts of our community in Litchfield that relate to design, which we've already started laying out. We have to have those. Then we have to have, with each of those, we have to have the sub components of those.
To Kim's point, though, we've applied our own biases to what we think should be in that. We haven't received any community input. We haven't received.
We have though. You continue to say that. We have a survey that does
5-year-old survey.
But okay,
Yeah.
but that's what we have to work off of. We could either start from an uninformed perspective and say, we have nothing, so what are we going to do? Or we could say, this is what the town said 5 years ago. Let's start there and try to get something out of that.
Follow up.
Because if we don't start there, where are we going to start? Like on like the most global scale, and we're going to be doing this until we're all dead.
So you have,
Unless you do another survey.
right.
Right, but I even think that with another survey, I think that may actually be necessary for something like this. But I think that you have to learn from the 2012 survey. Too broad. Like we need a very.
It's got to be more.
It's got to be.
linear.
Yeah. You got to help
Yeah.
So
generate what the information
let
is.
me kind of throw a couple things out there. So the 2012 survey was intentionally broad and
Right.
vague because that one was used to help inform the future land use vision piece of the planning process, which is a broader and larger piece. But you do have the 2012 piece. You do have the future, your land use chapter, which includes your future land use vision. So you've got some broader policy statements that you did get some public input directly into. So I think what the intent here is taking it the next step. So that future land use piece really focused on what goes where. This next piece is more how do you define and what should the what look like. So it's a little bit different. It's not necessarily talking about place-based, it's talking about that thing, what it is that gets created, or how it gets created, and creating a framework. So you do have something that you can start with, but you definitely need to go a step beyond that. You don't have enough definition or granularity to what's there from 2012 to be able to do something meaningful with today. It's also 5 years old, so you need to reassess. You need to reconfirm whether some of the findings from that are even still valid today. So you have something you can start with to point you in at least point you somewhere, help weed out the things that you know are just not that have resounding no, that's not our community. That sort of thing. It at least gives you a foundation to work with. So I've actually been kind of jotting stuff down as you all talk, and you've actually defined a few more steps here to the process than you necessarily think. And if you kind of put it together in some sort of order, you're starting with what you have and just using it as a reference point. You are creating a subcommittee that includes representation from all boards and commissions in town, but you still need to create a charter for that commission or for that subcommittee. And that would define what the deadlines are, what work would be conducted, and focus areas that subcommittee would address. As either part of that subcommittee's charter or a parallel piece that you do, I also have down that you're going to develop a survey that assesses what residents desire and gains additional detail for you. And you need to when you're creating that, it needs to make sure that any of the options considered are economically and practically feasible, and that you take each aspect that the board knows are important to the community, such as agriculture, open space, etc., and further inquire what it is that residents value about it and what do they see as the future for that particular element. So that's a handful of at least initial steps, which is more than we've had at the last few meetings when we've discussed this.
Well, remember the meeting we had in here with the public,
Yes,
which was a very good meeting?
it was a very good,
With what, 40
a decent turnout. Yeah.
some odd people?
Yep.
And that's what we had to split it into two groups. And the same thing, asking what they wanted.
Yep.
And we get some very broad and interesting answers.
Yeah, but in terms of, just to fortify my point that I was making before, I was talking to my neighbor about commercial development the other day, and he was like, right off the bat, he was like, oh, no commercial development. We don't want, that's not what we want in this town. And then I talked to him a little bit about what one possible vision for limited commercial development was. And he was like, oh, all right, well, that would actually be nice to have that stuff here. When you say commercial development, I'm thinking 102 and Hudson. That's like what everyone automatically goes to. So it's hard because on the one hand, you want to leave it broad for people to bring in their own input, but without giving them any guidance, they automatically go to something where they don't even think about what the alternative is. So I think we just have to create some ideas for them as to what it could be, and then ask them, do you have any other ideas of what it could be? Because automatically they go to, this is not what I want it to be. They'll automatically say, well, I don't want that. Okay, well, that's good to know, but
Right.
let's.
So I would recommend that when you get to the point of creating a survey, you do it as a visual survey. And I would look at the one that's posted on the Google site. There's an example from Amherst. It was specifically for their downtown, but you could use, I would not use those exact questions. It's just an example of how you can structure questions and provide illustrations. And I think when we start talking about how you characterize different types of development, it helps to have different images. And so what it is it presents different scales, types of features that might be allowed or permitted within the community, and gives folks something they can respond to.
You know what else would be cool is even being able to get some sort of this probably costs money, but some sort of rendering as to we were talking last week about this space out in front of the town hall here, and it'd be interesting to know, do people like that wooded the way it is? Would people like that as an open park type area? You talk about it like an amphitheater or something like that. Would people like that? But it'd be awesome to be able to say, what do you think, for this particular space here, if we identified this as a particular open space, we can say, here's one of the open spaces that we currently have, that the town owns. How do you like the use of it now? Or would you like it better used in one of these fashions? We could, lay some of that stuff out there. I think let's take a couple of those points and just start hashing them out. And then as we go through them, we may say, oh, you know what? We forgot about this point. So I just started writing stuff about open space because I figure you guys are sick of hearing me talk about commercial development. So I figured I'd start with something else.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
We have 2 data points if the second survey goes through. 2012, whatever this new survey will be.
Yeah.
The town has a nice cable department over there. If we do have an open meeting and it's now on cable, I'm just saying we're trying to get as much to the public. Not everybody fills out a survey in this town, right? I'm just saying that I think we're in for not a long road, but there's a lot of data gathering that has to happen here.
Agreed.
Not just electronic data gathering.
Right.
Go out to these things in town where people show up,
Agreed.
and talk to the different types of people in town.
I would.
One thing I
different,
have noticed that's interesting, on the Litchfield site, that a lot of talk was brought up about the new development on Cutler, and people were very well informed. People have been watching and listening. They do know what's been going on. They don't come in, but
It's shocking.
yeah, it is.
I've also seen a lot of people saying, hey, what's going on with this?
Yep.
And they're not informed. But I don't want to interrupt your point.
No, but the point is, to a lot of people, we have to get out there and tell them, we have all these things available. The meetings are on the line.
But
For all the boards?
right, but like Jen was saying though too, really the point of any survey is to gather specific information, answers to specific questions that we need to generate, and so it's going to be really important for us to design that well. So, that way
So
we can
let me ask a question.
information.
You say it's important for us to design that well. Are we talking about the subcommittee designing it, or are we talking about us designing
Well,
Good question.
yeah, that's a good question. I think that it'll definitely have some component of the subcommittee, whether it's the information from the subcommittee is brought back here to be developed, or whether the subcommittee itself develops it. Either way, they're going to have
So
something.
now you're getting to something that I can engage with, because what we're doing is we're spinning back to ideas that we have, and we're not really taking steps forward on the process spectrum, right? So again, we're here, we want to get to here. What is it we're going to do between those two things? And we keep falling back into talking about these tactical things that we want to do. Okay, so we want to talk about open space, and we want to talk about business development, that sort of thing. I want to understand what it is we want to do from a strategic perspective to get us from where we are to where we want to go. If what we're saying is we want to build a subcommittee, let's talk about what we're going to charter that subcommittee with, because that gets back to your point of, okay, so are they designing the survey? Are we designing the survey? Are we just telling them they need to go build a survey? What's our opinion of what their charter is? So then we can decide how we're going to handle what they bring back and what we intend to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't talk about what the steps are, all we're going to do is we're going to spend another meeting talking about those things that we want to talk about. And I don't want to spend another meeting talking about those things we want to talk about. I want to spend a meeting talking about what we're going to do in order to get to that end point of, yeah, we got a community design chapter.
Who's responsible for of maintaining the community design? Is it the planning board, that chapter, or could it be a collaboration
Will it
of
be
all
part
of the
of the
groups?
master
It's master plan, yeah.
All right, so that gives us some authority in the process, right?
Oh, I
We
would-
need their feedback. So
Yes.
it has to be collaboration
Yes.
with the groups, but I don't know where our authority.
Well,
If we have
I think
any.
our authority, I'm speculating here, and I would look to you guys, and particularly Jen, to offer feedback. I think we have authority to charter a subcommittee to bring us back something. The question is what do we want them to bring us back? Can we define what it is we want them to bring us back? If so, I mean, I think we've all agreed we want as much input as we possibly can get from some type of subcommittee. We want the rec people, we want public input, we want selectmen, we want conservation, we want everyone to provide input. And the broader we cast that net, the more information we get back, but we have to know what information we want back.
I have a question. The subcommittee is to make a survey?
That's what he's
They
asking.
might already
What?
have data that's.
What does it do? What are we making the subcommittee for?
That's what he's asking. That's the question.
What's the
he's
charter?
asking.
What? Yes, but
What's-
there's no answer. What are we doing?
What are your thoughts?
Sure, why not? We can make a subcommittee to design a survey if that's what we want it to do, but it's our prerogative to do the community design chapter. It sounds like we keep going into like this point where we're like, oh, we want to make sure we get the consensus of all the people in the town, and that's great and that's important, but at the end of the day, we're the ones writing the chapter, right? We have to start.
The answer to that is it could be, because our charter for the subcommittee could be bring us back a community design chapter and we'll approve it.
You could.
Yeah.
We would be abdicating our role and our responsibility, in my opinion, but that could be a charter. It could be provide us with a draft community design chapter and we will review it, incorporate our own feedback, and then put that to the voters.
Or develop a proposal.
Yes.
In that sense. You know,
Yes.
Bring us a proposal for community design that we can.
And then we leave it to them. We say one of the things we want you to be sure and do is a survey, an updated survey.
I think what you'd want to look at is those things: open space, the issue in natural resources, and maybe those things specifically that we can identify as.
And I would say that list is an including but not limited to list.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And if
But we
It's
don't
not
want to give them an objective. We want to say, we want your opinions on this, 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 and this. Open space, light commercial, development in different areas. Don't tell them within these boundaries. Just, this is what we want.
Well,
And let the, because if we don't, what we're going around now is we're saying, we want them to do this, we're gonna tell them what we want.
Well, but I think that the point that was just made that was good is tell them we want these things and whatever else you have to say.
Right.
So I don't want to say we want your thoughts on open space. I want to say we want your thoughts on open space. We're interested in what do we currently have for open space? Do we have enough? Do we need more? Could we give some up? Do we need to account for future changes in use in open space? Are there better ways to utilize any of our open space that we're currently using? What else do you think? Because if you don't ask those questions, then you come back with a 2012 survey. So
Asking the questions is okay.
Right.
But we don't wanna set a parameter on them.
right.
That it's gonna be inside this bubble.
I think the thing, we are setting up a proposal, so basically, it's not something that basically set in stone. I think we have to make that clear at the outset.
Right.
This isn't something that's gonna, you're gonna create this and this is what it's gonna be. That's our job. We are the planning board, we are the
Right.
ones that are gonna make that decision.
And you have to remember that our interests may be at odds with some of the other boards on some things, and we have to then remember that our commitment is to planning. You know, yes, we want that to always be in alignment with the budget, but sometimes we have to go to the selectmen and say, hey, listen, you need to really start considering this. I know you haven't budgeted for this, but you really have to start.
I think that's why it's important we clarify very specifically what deliverable we intend to collect from the subcommittee, because and what we intend to do with it. We need to be upfront about, again, begin with the end in mind. If we don't tell them what we intend to do with it, they could design the perfect swing set, and what we're looking for is a roller coaster.
But that's why, as much as you hate where I keep going with this, from at least the way my mind works, I need to know what we're talking about before I say to them, this is the deliverable we need, or this is what we're looking for from you. So that's why I started drafting these questions.
Right,
Circular-
but if you're making a list of including but not limited to,
Right.
you can talk from now until the end of this meeting about what you want on that list. Great, we could come up with that list as part of the subcommittee. The subcommittee could make it I want everyone to go to the full committee of each of the committees, each of the boards, and say, tell me what you want on this, us to examine as the subcommittee. They could expand it to whatever lengths they want, as long as it's including but not limited to. I'm not going to say you can't put this on that list or that subcommittee, because I think the more inclusive we are, the better off we are. So again, we can talk about the things that you want to include, and I'm just going to say yes. I'm going to vote, yeah, add that to the list. So why we need to list the specifics of what we give that subcommittee, I don't know. But yeah, okay, add it. So then we can get on to the conversation of what is it we're going to do with what they come back with, and what is it we're going to charter them to come back with. And that to me is progress about what it is we want in the end, which is that defined community design plan. Because I want them to include whatever they want to include in that conversation.
So let me do my best to impersonate Steve for the evening for you.
Steve, are you listening?
This is stupid. Why are we even talking about this?
When is this committee meeting? Is this committee staffed? Who's preparing the agendas? Who's preparing the minutes? And how is it being managed, kind of organized? Because a subcommittee of your planning board is still a public body.
Mm-hmm.
And all of their meetings must be noticed, publicly noticed, and you must follow 91A for everything. So is it an additional meeting above and beyond your planning board meetings? Are they meeting during the day? Are they meeting in the evening? Is it staffed? Who's taking care of all of those administrative things to make it happen?
What if we just did it as like So instead of it being one member of the planning board as part of this committee, the committee comes in and meets with us as a full board on our planning day that we use.
I would agree with that because I don't believe that a subcommittee has been budgeted for. And if we don't do that, then it's an unintended, unplanned expense.
Plus, then we're also bypassing any sort of need to come back with the person coming back to report to us on what happened in that. We just are involved with it. I also think if we design this well enough, we won't need to have a ton of meetings. It'll be hopefully very targeted and productive meetings. Which seems to be something that you value.
Well, the first thing,
Far be it.
first thing we need is communications. We need go up with what you're doing, all the different items we want on there. One of the ones I want is transportation in town,
I think that's
which
a
I'm
great
working on.
I think that's a great thing to add.
Add it.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Let's do this. Let's go around the table and everyone name their one or two top topics that you feel very strongly should be addressed and discussed during the process. And we'll make it as address these here's a list that's not limited to,
I think go through those and then let's take them each and say what are there certain things within those that we want to make sure are addressed.
Yes. Okay.
Not exclusively. But.
All right. Which end of the table we want to start with? List out a
Start
couple.
with me.
Go.
3, agritourism, business development, and housing in the town.
When
Okay.
you say business development, I guess we can expand on that after.
Okay. Joe.
I mean, I just think residential and commercial development, really, but that's those are the only things that I came in for.
Okay. Tom.
River access and transportation, on-call transportation.
I like both of those.
Yeah.
I think river access though could definitely be folded into open space.
You guys just want to redo your future land use chapter?
You know?
I like it.
Because that's what I'm hearing.
you
I'm
wanted
hearing you guys rehash your future land use chapter. Each time we hit topics, I'm hearing future land use chapter or your land use
just
chapter.
keep us on community design, and then we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Don't start pulling us in another direction.
What's that?
Actually, one of my dad's comments after one of the meetings that he watches.
He's the one.
He's the one. He's the one.
Is we already did this?
We already did that. We have an executive summary that describes what the master plan's already about, and we have land use that describes what we want to do with the land. So why do we need?
Oh, he tried to shoot this
Community
down before.
design.
Tell him.
So
Well, and
and I
that's
don't know enough about it to
and
say.
that's where I would clarify. You don't want to create something that's redundant with or conflicting with what you've already done. If your conclusions conflict with work you've already done, you need to reopen those other chapters.
Right, but
and
until we
amend
discuss
them.
it, we won't know.
That's true. That said, I think to focus on how, again, this is not where, so your land use chapter already defines like a list of saying we want river access and we want, it's got those big topics, right, already in there. So now what does it look like? Or how does it feel? Or what is that design characteristic that so it's taking those specific elements that
Right.
step further.
But let's take the river access thing for a
Yes.
second, right? So I fold that into open space, but I'm interested to know, does that mean, do we have walking trails that are along the river? Do we have like parks along the river? Do we have commercial development that's along the river that has like open space for like eating, or you know what I mean? Like, so in my mind, that's where we're going with this,
Okay.
which I think is design, right?
Okay.
I might be at odds with everyone else, but I think that
And
that's
we have none of that.
All right. All right, so Tom, you had river access and transportation.
Yeah, on-call transportation.
Okay.
Do you want to limit it to just on call?
I want something that's feasible.
See, that's
On-call
your
transportation is for the elderly, for wellness visits, for doctor's visits, for shopping, people that don't have cars.
Well, let's put that in a design perspective. Is it a trolley? Is it a
Okay.
what are those
Bus
guys that
stops.
ride the bicycles
You
that
know-
you get on?
Oh yeah,
the
because
back
we're
of?
creating the community design chapter as an example, right? Of like what would the town might the town be able to look like in 10 to 15 years. Okay,
Do we
so
want,
that
do
makes
we,
it more
do we want
applied.
a trolley system coming in?
Yeah,
Do we want?
rather than saying these are the guidelines for what we want in town, it's saying here's an example of how we could develop.
What is it? What do we want it to look like?
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Do we want a subway in Litchfield?
If you can't, your community design chapter would be better served with being more pictures than words.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay. So it's visual.
Yeah.
So you can tell your dad that's why it's
Yeah.
not already covered.
Yes. All
If you're
right.
so interested, show up at the meetings.
That too.
You hear that, Russ?
All right, Mike.
I think what I picture it is what it looks like is the this almost the idea that we have forests that we can access. We have the New England feel. For when I say the New England feel, I'm talking about the farms and the agricultural presence in the community. And I also think the residential community, the bedroom community, where we see houses and development in that residential field.
Kim.
One quick note before I answer my two. When I reread the economic chapter and the land use chapter, that seemed to be a lot of statistics.
Yeah.
So it was you can't lie. This was our past, this is what we are now, this is what we are projecting. This chapter is not that. This chapter
It
is
can be.
future, maybe. That's what I'm saying. That's why I think this chapter is different. To tell your father. I think my two are economic development, a diversity of one, and we need to maybe elaborate more on town services, fire station, ambulance, kind of thing. Where it's going to be.
Still very future land usey. Can make it work. All right, town services, fire, police.
We'll just make an interactive 3D model of Litchfield in 10 years and call that our community design chapter.
There's the visual.
All right, Matt.
Commercial development. And I'm saying open space, but like I don't know if that's the proper categorization because I also I'm thinking not just about open space, I'm thinking about trails, I'm thinking about
Parks and Rec.
Conservation.
Yeah.
Yeah, but basically ability to interact with the outdoors in town, I guess.
Parks and Rec.
That's fine. Sure. But some of those, I think, if we were to, like you said, economic development, I say commercial development, there's probably a ton of overlap between what we're both thinking.
Yeah, home businesses,
Yeah.
big businesses,
Right.
just but diverse businesses. We need to, again, word it vaguely, all kinds of business,
Right.
welcome as many as possible, not
Yeah.
not give an exclusion as all.
Okay.
But, like in talking about community design, what does that look like? Well, we already have, for home business, we already have a home
Yep.
occupation thing.
Exactly.
But if we were to try to say, okay, if we're going to bring in business, if that business is retail, food service type business, if it's true office type business, what does that even look like? Where would that go? What would that actually look like? Is it going to be like a shared space? Is it going to be just like a small strip center, whatever? A lot of pieces.
Discuss.
Yeah, and also like even in residential development too, we should look at like what is that going to look like in the future? Are we going to have more multifamily and low-income housing? Are we going to have big, huge mansions put up all over town? We should discuss what we think would happen, what we want for the future.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing that's tough with residential is that
You have to wait for a developer to come in and
well,
actually do
but
it.
it's also defined by like our zoning. So
Yeah.
like these are the multifamily options, right? So they're either going to be filled with multifamily or they're not.
Yeah.
The residential, like you'll see in towns, if you look at some towns, I see it more in Massachusetts than I do here. But there's some towns where, someone will take my house, which is 1,800 square feet, and they'll bulldoze it and they'll build a 4,000 square foot monstrosity. There are towns where they do that pretty much on every lot now.
Regardless, if we're talking about what do we think the town's going to look like in 10 to 15 years, or what do we want to look like, then we should
But
also discuss.
we're also trying to help guide like what that's
yeah,
gonna
where
look
the
like.
And the other group that we should be talking to as well is the developers and the landowners.
Well, Attorney Perlman
That's-
came
that's
in.
one of
community
the
outreach
biggest
for that
groups.
too, because we should really get them involved.
And
We gotta find a way to get developers and business
All
people
right, so
in.
who do we need at the table?
All of the representation from all of the town boards, some type of public representation. I like the idea of involving developers, town developers, maybe, I don't know if there's an agricultural, group that all of the local farms belong to, but it might be nice to get some type of representation from farm owners and operators.
And just an idea, but that maybe we may want to do that in phases. So it may be
Yes.
that we start with the town boards, and then we boil it down, and then we invite in, or simultaneously with the public. But I would almost think that developers we would want to invite in even a little bit further down line to once we have more definition to what the town, the boards want and the public wants in the town.
Okay.
So while I agree with you, I also disagree with you ever so slightly. And I started out in my mind when you first started talking, agreeing with you completely. And then it struck me that if you don't have developers who are watching us and they're not tuned in, and they don't tune in until they become involved, then you have a whole lot of catching up for those individual groups to do. Whereas if you're inviting them from the beginning,
Even if they're not saying it.
then they get a choice as to whether or not they show and participate. But you're inviting them from the beginning to be participative and collaborative throughout the entire process, then nobody can say, well, you didn't really talk.
Yeah, I think the only concern that I would have with developers is twofold. One, how much time can you really get out of them? Most of them are pretty busy. And two, developers generally are geared towards doing whatever's going to be the most lucrative, right? So like their input is always going to be, well, this is the most lucrative. So we could have 1 million self-storage units here because those are super lucrative. But I think once they're...
I'm building some on my property right now.
You should. Good for you. If you don't, I think that was my thought in terms of trying to have some guidance for them before we start letting them go crazy on what they would love to see because they're going to be looking at dollars.
But you're forgetting one very important thing. Our view for the future involves the land that's available. They're the ones that control that land.
Well,
The
you're
builders and
assuming that the
developers.
developers own the land already. They don't already own the land.
A lot of,
Some of them may.
and I also said the large landowners that are working with them.
Right.
Like, we already have one that's willing, wants to come in and talk to us.
Are we prematurely kicking off an economic, I don't want to say boom, but something that wouldn't have happened normally, but now that we're putting this on the table and inviting builders, may take off?
Well, but as you heard from Attorney
That's gonna be
Perlman,
market-driven.
they already asked. They've already
Right,
asked.
I'm just
him.
saying that I don't know ethically if we should be facilitating economic
And
development.
where Matt's going is, it's already on some people's minds and they're already looking at it. You need to be prepared.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're facilitating economic development necessarily, we're facilitating input.
We're
Yeah.
asking what they.
But I mean, just putting the idea in their heads might just
Well,
stop
no,
things
they-
earlier is all I'm
See,
saying, that
the-
they would have naturally done.
The ideas are already in their head.
Yeah.
We want what they
We wanna be
are
prepared.
envisioning, what they would like to do with the land that they are not controlling, but have interest in.
I agree
And
they
see
should
what
be
we
there, but
would
that's the
allow them to
resource we're
do.
talking about, but I just don't know if we are.
I
If we
don't-
are
we can
expediting
have-
something
have a
that's not gonna
discussion
happen
about butterfly
naturally
effect if we want
for
to.
5 years, we're gonna make it all of a sudden happen in 3.
No,
That's my concern.
They're ready to pull the trigger when they're ready to pull the trigger. Like
Yeah.
we just saw that with Erickson. We weren't talking about that. They were on the back end of things talking with the landowner saying, hey, we're interested in buying up your land and developing it.
That's one person, but there's a lot of, I don't know if there's one person who owns land or many land developers that, maybe in 5 years out, but all of a sudden now it's on the table, and so like, hey, maybe we should look at
So
selling
my
that
only
land
my
off
only
of-
thought on that, Kim, is we can't be we can't pick and choose who we're going to be inclusive
Absolutely.
with.
yeah.
That's what I mean, we have to, when they come in front of us, is it legal? Is it safe? I just don't think,
Well, we're not
We should be
making any
facilitating.
deals with anybody.
that's what I mean, we have
We're
to
ask- we're
not
just
do that, that's
asking
what I'm
them-
saying, that's what I think we're kind of
We're
flirting with
asking
here by
opinions.
doing this chapter. I just want that on the
Information,
record, that,
Yeah, we're
Hmm?
gathering facts for
okay.
what people envision.
Yeah,
They're-
I agree
they're
with it
involved in it.
intellectually, I just don't know if it would
Yeah.
have naturally happened in 5 years or 3, and we're kind of expediting it.
No. It's basically time for it.
It's our responsibility to prepare for it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, regardless of
whether or not we're pushing the timeline forward is a philosophical discussion that we
I'm just
probably
saying,
not
again, I'm
best
asking
suited for.
what the role of the planning board
Yeah.
is. Is it to facilitate this early, or I understand we should be prepared for it,
Yeah.
but I don't wanna facilitate it if it wasn't going to happen anyway,
I
but
don't
now it
think-
I don't think
may.
it matters.
I don't think we're facilitating anything.
Okay,
Joan,
that was
Yes.
some of
what
my
do we got?
question.
3 major developers, right?
You have some large landowners besides,
Well, yeah, but I mean, we have 3 developers that are also landowners. Well, we have one that's a landowner.
yeah. And then, you have the south end,
So I mean,
large
it's
landowner.
it's not that bad an idea to get them all in on this at the same time.
So here's some thoughts. So I just put just uploaded. I hope a community outreach and engagement. It's like a 11 by 17 folded kind of how-to ideas. I just loaded it up to the Google site here. So
On the agenda items page.
yeah, under community design on that page. Yeah.
The overreach and engagement, the third attachment.
It's a PDF. I just loaded at the bottom. It's a UNH cooperative extension document. So where you're kind of headed is the outreach and engagement component of this. Is how do you get public input or how do you get community input? And you need to get a broad spectrum of input. And the way you get and collect that input is going to be different for depending upon the audience. And so you need to figure out, and so what I started writing, and then I was like, oh heck, I gotta just go find this little matrix, is the method that you do this. So you wanna start with, you get your, if you look at, it's actually the back of the thing, but when you're looking at it, it's the first thing you see, for this little document. This planning chart, they kind of list every possible entity, group that might exist within your community, and you've got to figure out who those people are, who represent those, and are they applicable to your project? And then what's the objective when you speak to that constituent group? So with developers, if we kind of take them as a constituent group, you got a couple objectives when you talk to them. You want to find out what's in their brains. What are they possibly thinking about that they might bring forward that you need to be prepared for? And I always recommend when you do this, you find some developers that you trust. That they're not they're not here to kind of slide something through on the sly and get you on their side. You want someone who's going to be honest with you and say, listen, this is what the market is demanding. And so I'm looking for properties in not just your community, but surrounding communities where I can do X, Y, and Z. Or I see that, this might be feasible in your community or this might not be. So you want to get in their heads and understand what's feasible, what you need to be prepared for. Because again, when you brought up the point of what's the point of putting big box on a survey when big box is not feasible here because there's just not the market demand to support it. Getting at that. So just figuring out what that framework is that you need to be able to respond to. When you're talking to your recreation folks, you're talking to people who represent the users of the land. And so what they see as important. And they may, so they're going to be, you're going to have a different objective when you talk to the recreation folks and you do when you talk to the developers. So you need to figure, as you identify your different audiences, you need to identify what's the objective for the conversation you're having with them and what's the most appropriate way to have that conversation. And there's different ways that you can engage them. For some people, for your broader community at large, you may just be looking for education, just to report back and say, this is what we're thinking about. Stop in, give us your input. But it may not be as kind of direct or as deep a level of engagement. So going through and trying to figure out who the audience is, what's the objective of that conversation, and what do you need from them, and how do you engage them? So when you're talking to residents, how would you engage residents? Well, first I say you probably, survey's your first bet. Second, you got to get out on social media. Third, you got to have a public meeting, and you got to find a way to get them here and engaging with you. So there's 3 ways that I would engage public. But with public, I would have a structured event where you have some specific exercises that may be open-ended, but you have a planned event that is targeted at gaining responses to questions that you have of residents. When you're talking to your zoning board, though, you're going to have a whole different conversation. You're going to have a completely different objective with that zoning board. And so figuring out your audiences that you want to engage and how you're going to engage each. So that's a different, it's coming up with a different strategy. It's adding to that charter and that roadmap. It might be taking it a step further than we need to today. Right now, the charter might simply be these are the different users or entities that we need to speak with throughout the process, and then we define as we get to each. We define how we conduct that engagement. Does that make sense? You want to make sure.
I have a great idea for how to get residents.
Yes.
Just start a rumor that there's going to be a pipeline through everyone's
Yeah.
and they will flood in here. And they'll be like, so that's not true. What we actually wanted to talk to you about.
Unfortunately, now you're
Surprise.
about the rumor.
No one's listening. Russ is the only one that won't.
You won't be fooled.
Oh, that's gracious. Yes. All right.
So I
Does that
agree,
help you?
generically speaking.
Yes. What generic? Wait.
I agree generically
Oh,
speaking
okay.
with what you were just saying.
Yeah.
Just in general.
I was thinking about another group that might be added, and I don't know.
Budget.
But, abutting towns.
What was it?
Buddington.
You
Abutting
can.
towns. I mean, they are regional stakeholders to what it is we're intending to do here, and we're regional stakeholders to what they intend to do.
Especially our neighbors to the east, where they get so much industrial going in right now. I know they just started another big building over there.
So who do we talk to, and how do we get in touch with all these people?
Londonderry's easy.
Okay.
Their planning board is very
NPRC.
easy to work with.
Sweet.
I have lunch with their plan.
So what's next?
We assemble.
Timeframe.
We assemble, and. That's
Okay.
happening.
Charter?
Charter.
What is it we want them to do?
Well, it's you with pulling in different constituent groups into your meetings is I think what you've got in the end. No?
So I guess the question is, and this may be more of a procedural question, I don't know.
if we are running this thing, are we running it as if it were a subcommittee, or are we running it as we are the committee and it's not me?
Not me.
Shut it off.
Guilty charge. Are we running it as a subcommittee, or are we running it as the planning board?
I think we're running it as the planning board with a group of people that we're inviting in to participate in our meetings, not like a full subcommittee, right? Because then we just talk about how that's not going to be productive.
Well, I guess to me the difference is a subcommittee could get things done as a subcommittee, whereas the planning board has to get things done as the planning board. And I could see the subcommittee involving other stakeholders in the body which runs that subcommittee, and they could get more done as a group than necessarily planning.
Right, but didn't we talk about then who's gonna handle
for it.
those meetings? Who's gonna, because it's all
Right, but
official.
I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with that. I think that still having them come in here, but then having a subcommittee meeting within the planning board meeting is a possibility.
Right, so
Well, we do have that covered. Our second meeting of the month is a work session.
Technically,
my point was, let's just use the work session as that.
As
Right, I get the point, but I guess mine is more of a procedural point. Do they function as the subcommittee in that work meeting? And there's
So
actually
basically-
a formal subcommittee in that work meeting.
Are you basically asking whether, like, the full board doesn't come to that meeting and it's just a subcommittee, or
No, I'm not concerned about full board there or not. I'm more concerned about
what's their
that
authority?
if it's a subcommittee and it's operating as a independent body, I see them getting more work done than they're waiting for us to
meet
do
on a
this.
Tuesday night.
Exactly. And they don't have to. I mean, I know that there are quorum rules. I know that there are procedural rules, and I don't know what they all are. But if they're operating independently as a subcommittee, I could see them getting more done because they have more people. They would have more people to bring in to get things done than we do.
Yeah, well, if they come before us in that context, the meeting is our meeting.
Yes.
So their quorum would not be taken into account. Because we would be doing the minutes of the meeting.
You know, I think if we're going to do this, and maybe we need to think about this. I mean, we're thinking, oh, well, we're going to create the subcommittee and everybody. If we sent out a letter to the different boards, basically telling them, we're working on this community design project. What I want to do, I think what we need to focus on, first of all, is find out, how do you feel about that? Because I think, instead of just bringing everybody in, I think we need to know, okay, does the zoning board feel that this is a good idea? Does the Conservation Commission think this is something that they would be interested in doing? At least getting the input of the people first and getting an idea or a consensus that this is something that they want to do. And then, if it is, then move to the next step and say, okay, well, we would like to create this and we would like to bring you on board. I guess I'm just trying to think this out in terms of,
It's a good idea.
you know what I'm saying?
Actually,
'Cause I think if we-
nice.
well,
People will have an opportunity to opt in and opt out
Right.
Yeah.
based upon how they feel about participation, regardless of whether you ask them first.
Right.
So that they will choose to participate or they won't choose to participate. They might show up for one meeting, they might show up for them all. Okay.
So, yeah.
Jen, could you draft something up on that idea for the boards from us?
I'll, some sort of communication.
It's like, hey, come over. We're doing this cool
Yeah.
thing.
And,
Because I think it's better to find out, first off, okay, this is what we're going to do, but we want to know from you folks.
are you gonna show
Are
up?
you going to opt in? Are you looking to opt out? And if you are,
Well, do we really,
then we need to
But-
know that up front.
do we need
but
RSVPs?
Regardless, what if they all say we're opting out?
does that change the fact that we want to do this? No.
No,
No, but it changes how you do it.
right.
It's just gonna change the method.
Why? Why does it change how
Because we're not, those groups are not gonna be involved in it, the process.
It doesn't mean they wouldn't be invited into it, despite the fact that they said that they were going to be opting out. We would still invite them, even though they told
Agreed.
us they were going to
Right.
opt out.
Yeah, so why not
Well,
just
yeah,
send
it's a
an
pub,
invite?
it's,
Skip
we
a
have to anyway, because
Public
it's
meeting,
public.
so.
But if you need their input, it changes how you go about getting their input.
Right, but we
It
don't know-
changes whether it's you each pick a board and go to one of their meetings and sit down and request to be on their agenda to discuss it on their terms. And then you come back with a report. Well, I talked to the zoning board, and here's the feedback that I was able to collect from the zoning board. So that would be one approach that you could take versus having the zoning board come to you. So you need to figure, that's part of what you need to figure out is, are you going to get the bodies that are willing to come to an additional meeting? Because that's what we're asking people to do, is add meetings to their night schedule and life, which doesn't always get affirmative responses. Huh?
You guys are so much nicer than I am.
Why?
Okay.
It's
People are either going to opt in or opt out
Right.
to participate with the extra night
yeah,
if you send a letter or if you show up.
right.
So it doesn't really matter how you approach it, it matters that you approach it.
True.
And even if they opt out, they're still going to be invited to be participants because we have all agreed that we see that their input is needed.
True.
Like I said, you're so much nicer than I am because I would just say you're invited to participate in this because we feel that you're
Yes.
important to the process.
And leave it
Easy peasy.
Here's when the first meeting.
Yeah. Surprise us next week.
in. No.
But did we get to the heart of the question as to whether or not it's going to be run as a subcommittee or a planning board?
What's the
And do we understand what we're gonna ask
difference
them?
if we run it as a subcommittee versus we run it as a planning board?
Well, if we're running it on the same night, you can do the planning board meeting,
Yeah.
end it, and start the subcommittee meeting. And you're not incurring any additional budgetary concerns because you've got the same people here,
Right.
it's the same staff,
Right.
same costs, so you can effectively run the subcommittee and the planning board as two independent bodies. And I mean, I just see that there's potentially a value to having more boots on the ground doing work than just the planning board. And if you run it as a subcommittee, you have a wider pool to draw from than the 7 or 8 of
You're-
us.
So just as a clarification, for a planning board work session, you can have other people than your planning board here. And what it is essentially you would be inviting them to, these other people to, join you in the process, and I don't know if you need to call it a subcommittee to get those other people to the table. But essentially when logistically, when you write your minutes, you can say planning board members, other community representatives, you just list the extra people at the top of the page and you just do your minutes as one big thing, same as you would with just an extended list of people at the table. And you as a planning board, you have the authority to hold joint meetings. You can have other people come to the table and participate in your meeting. And it's, even as the planning board, you can run that as a larger conversation.
See, by our bylaws, we write them in, it's all our meeting and we chair it.
Yeah.
It's
When
not
you
like
do
the
joint meetings, yeah, you chair it. So I think it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, whether it's
Yeah.
like the board versus a subcommittee.
So what I'm thinking,
The title.
what I'm thinking is if we get a dozen people sitting here, 2 reps from
Yeah,
a half dozen different places.
yeah.
What's their level of buy-in to whatever it is we're trying to accomplish? Are they a member of something,
Yeah.
or are they here and listening? And maybe they get up and they speak, and maybe we can ask them to do something for us, and maybe we can't. But if they're a member of a subcommittee and they've volunteered their time affirmatively to not only be here but to participate and be part of a formalized body to execute a formalized charter for that subcommittee, the way that you respect that and you show up for that as a human being is different than if, I don't really have to go to that meeting.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
And what they're willing to do if they're part of a subcommittee as opposed to I got to go show up to this planning board meeting and I really don't want to, is going to be different. Your reaction as a human being is going to be different, and all I'm trying to do is, I mean, I'd love some input from the audience on this, but I'm trying to get people to participate.
Yeah.
And we could do it either way. We can open the meeting and close it.
I don't even think you need to open it and close it. I would say logistically, you would, as a planning board, you would open your meeting, you would do your planning board business, or you could say, okay, we're going to immediately proceed to, into the subcommittee meeting portion of tonight's agenda, have the subcommittee, and it would just be the same set of minutes in the end. It would just be one set of minutes for the night that would include the planning board plus the subcommittee in one document.
So let's do it as a subcommittee.
So, I mean, it could just, you can open it and then immediately
Go into that.
go into a subcommittee meeting.
All right. Sounds good to me.
Well, again, I mean, I don't want to try and sway people one way or the other here, but
Right.
I'm just, I just feel how do you show up for these as people?
Yeah, no, you explained it well. I think I agree with you. I think it just gets people more engaged to be part of something. So, yeah, I agree.
I mean, there's only so much we can do. I mean, we can give them the opportunity to do it.
Yeah.
And I think, if for some reason it doesn't work out the way we plan it, then we can just, we'll have to, either, adjust our, how we want to proceed. But if, we can get people in, then the more the merrier. But,
I'm willing to try it either way.
yeah, I think it's an opportunity, and go for it. It can't hurt. I mean, the Conservation Commission had a subcommittee that they were going to put together. We didn't expect to get the number. We got 11 people on the subcommittee who wanted to do it.
That's
and
awesome.
it's just like,
That's awesome.
whoa! I mean, and it's for this river access thing, and so it's like, you never know. Is someone going to be interested in this topic? Maybe they will. Maybe they'll come. Maybe you'll have a big group. You don't know. So it's, but at least you're giving them the opportunity.
Okay.
So.
All right, so we've got a list of things that we want the subcommittee to look at. That includes any other topics that they identify. We've started to identify who we need to have at the table. Work my list. So the folks that we're going to reach out to in a letter inviting them to be part of a subcommittee includes representatives from each of the town boards, developers and/or developers representatives, a representative of the agricultural community, residents, and anyone from neighboring towns that is interested.
You have developers. What about realtors?
Okay. Would you?
Represented on the board.
I just.
Tyler's a real estate agent, or was going to become one. Can't remember. But Adam.
We could always get somebody from Pelham if he's in the country.
Maybe. Meetings.
How about some of these groups that are listed on your PDF, for example, I could see high school students wanting to add something to their resume for college.
That'd be an awesome idea.
And it'd be
Yeah,
great to get the
for
participation. That might pull a few parents as well.
Yep.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, that certainly fits in with the future of the vision, you know, the state.
And some of the senior communities. Are there any senior communities that we can tap?
There's 8 of them in town.
How do we? I guess the question would be, how do we tap them? But
Through Tom.
from those all.
I'm familiar with them.
Tom goes around, knocks on some doors,
Okay.
says, "Hey, neighbor."
All right. So we've got who we're reaching out to. We've got a list of what they're at least going to start looking at, and they're going to then expand that list as appropriate. What are we asking? What are we asking them to do? What are their work tasks? I think so. We've got. I've heard a survey. Any additional community conversations needed to garner input?
I guess it goes back to what is it they're doing?
Yeah, the
What is it they're delivering?
I
Right.
thought we established that the purpose of this was that they're going to make a survey and determine what needs to be in that survey.
Right.
So,
Well, the ultimate thing is a chapter, right?
right.
So
We could have them do like a rough draft for us too, but I feel like a survey is the first step, right?
I would say a survey and then some additional conversations.
Part of that too, I think, is
Voices.
if we're trying to define what community design is for our purposes, coming up with something or a statement or something that applies to community design for Litchfield.
To Kim's point, that any statement that we came up with would be a planning board statement of, tinted with our biases about what that would be.
Right, but what I'm saying is having input from the public or the subcommittee or getting an idea from them what it might look like, or have an idea of what they perceive it to be, giving us some kind of sort of roadmap to say, okay, this is what they're suggesting. Maybe this is what it's going to look like. I mean, we don't have to. I mean, it may be that we don't, necessarily use it. But if they can provide it, or the information that they can provide would be invaluable, I think, to the planning board.
Ultimately, you have to adopt the document. So it ultimately becomes yours. You have to own it. However, for you to be able to pass that straight-face test and show that it's not your just a small group of people's personal biases, you really have to make sure that this one has good, robust, strong public input. And that is, not just your residents, but it's your businesses, it's the community, and getting all voices heard in the process and represented. And so sometimes that might mean showing where you have consensus and where you don't, and showing where there are some divergent ideas.
So maybe maybe we need to come up with a statement as to what this task force is chartered with, and it's gathering community input as far and wide as possible from the citizens of Litchfield about what the community design for the future looks like. Community design defined as : fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll take that as input, and make it clear in that charter that we're taking that as input to the community design chapter of the master plan.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, I think that says it all. I mean, that's basically what our goal is to is to develop that for the master plan, so, you know.
And so then I would say from there, once they go through that process of doing that really broad community input gathering, then they can develop and draft a statement of community preferences. Summarize that. What does it mean to me? What does it boil down to that's important within our community? So that would, I would say, would be that next step of developing that statement of preferences. And then from there, I'd say you go into a chapter outline and you begin developing content.
Two more groups you should invite,
Yes.
police and fire.
Okay.
You may get some interesting things from them.
All right.
The next thing is when.
Is what?
When we start this, plan for it. I'd say we plan for the meeting in September,
So a first subcommittee meeting in September?
the second meeting in September, yeah. Because July and August is,
Limited?
well, our next meeting will be the only meeting in July,
Thank you.
and then we have two meetings in, August, so. I don't know, when does Labor Day fall?
How do we gain, outside of the groups that we've already named, how do we garner public participation to that meeting? I mean, do we go out and socialize it? Do we put it on Litchfield What's Up? What do we do?
Put it on What's Up, we can put it on the community TV channel,
You following this,
put
Ross?
Yeah.
Litchfield News, you put in the, Hudson Litchfield News,
Are you talking
as
to
a
people in
letter to
school
the
board?
editor.
So who's gonna own that stuff? Who wants to do that stuff? Or do we have to worry about that right now? Or about it closer to the meeting?
I'd say maybe think about it for next meeting.
Let's get it drafted. Yeah, well, I think for the next meeting, for the July meeting, what I'd like to do is do a draft charter for you. And we can discuss that at the next meeting. And then, I think we should also look at, the community engagement, actually, maybe we'd save that for the committee, because that's part of the subcommittee, that's part of their charge. Yeah, figure out the steps. The first step, I think, is to develop that chart, look at the draft charter, and then maybe at one of your meetings in August, you guys can each volunteer to take one of the means of publicity and do that.
Yeah, I'm not at that meeting where we volunteer.
I'm gonna miss that meeting.
You're running it.
Then we're all in trouble.
It's a challenging chapter.
It's a very subjective chapter, and so I think to that end, that's going to pose some interesting conversations and challenges, because it's really hard to quantify public support for something that's subjective. And so that's where it comes back to think pictures, pictures, pictures.
Actually, that's what I was thinking when you said then we come back and start drafting the community design chapter. But then I thought to myself, in the socialization process, the subcommittee would necessarily put out to the public pictures, pictures, pictures. And when they came back from that, they would say, we like these 7 or 8 pictures, so we would adopt that into the plan, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just added that. Okay.
else tonight, Jen? I don't think.
I sent you all a copy of an email. I just figured I'd float it around.
The assistance with
Yeah, EPA's got a bunch of community technical assistance. It's literally that. It's technical assistance. It's training and it's information. It's think small scale. It'd be like a workshop if there was something that was of particular interest to the community. So it's, you know, a variety of different topics. So thought I'd float it out there. If you click on the link in the email, it gives some definition to each of these bullets. They're really quick response things. They're looking to not only solicit proposals, but go out and do all the technical assistance by the end of September.
wow.
So they're not going to every community in the state. They're gonna just pick a few communities that say, "Hey, come chat with us." So, as a heads up, I think that we at NRPC, along with a couple of at least Southern RPC, will probably put in for the stormwater management technical assistance request. One of the topics that they cover in there is the illicit discharge detection and elimination components of the MS4 permit. And so if you would put in and just do see if they could do a regional workshop on best practices and what communities should be planning for and thinking about. So we will be putting in for that one. That'll be a, you know, something probably during the day. I don't know how to structure it. That you can send Troy to and others, you know, staff that actually have to deal with it on the ground for you.
Grant proposal training sounds interesting.
Yeah. There will be grant dollars.
Assuming there are grant dollars.
So yeah, so that's there if you guys want to put in for something for the town. You are welcome to do
Did you say you sent that to Troy?
so. I didn't. I should.
Then I'll mention it to him afterwards.
Okay. I can do it right now.
Do you have anything else, Jen?
No.
Okay. Any committee reports?
Just that the Lower Merrimack River Advisory Committee meeting is this Thursday, June 22nd at 7 p.m. at the Nashua Public Library.
Just like to add the quarterly and annual meeting for an RPC tomorrow night at the office in Merrimack. Any other business? Joan?
Just the minutes.
Okay. Minutes?
I'd make a motion to accept the minutes as they're written.
Do I have a second?
Yes. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Abstain.
Abstained. Passes 5-0-2.
Did two of you abstain?
Hmm?
Did two people abstain?
Yeah.
I wasn't here last.
Neither one of us.
last time.
4, 0, 2. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4.
But I'm sorry, 4.
That's what you meant.
I'm not even good at math. Would you like to?
I was thinking we had a full board tonight.
It's wishful thinking.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Passes 6-0-0. Thank you all. Our next meeting will be July,